Hi, welcome to What We Learned This Week, episode 26, where it might not matter.
But we are going to talk about it anyway.
We are. I'm Shalene.
And I'm Liz.
And we have an awesome interview today.
We do. And this really does matter, I think. So we kind of joke about the not matter because sometimes it's just, the ramblings of Liz and Shalene.
That's the reason we started this podcast, so I could ramble.
It's fine. Mm-hmm. Outlets are good.
Yeah.
Wholesome, constructive outlets. Otherwise, she bakes me millions of loaves of bread and I eat them all. So,
yeah.
I feel like this is a good, healthy outlet, Shalene.
Oh, good. Yeah, me too.
So, our guest...
Calorie-free.
Calorie-free. Well, you could eat some bread while you listen.
I guess.
I don't know. Our guest today, Jenny Johnson, good friend of mine. Through the social medias and other things, we are interviewing her. She is a wealth of knowledge, a well of wisdom. Just, you're in for a treat today, getting to hear from her.
It's a topic that we've talked about sharing for a long time, but didn't quite know how to do it. Mm-hmm. So it's awesome that she was willing to talk to us about it today. And so without further ado, let's roll the interview.
Roll out.
Hi, we're welcoming Jenny Johnson to the show, and we're so excited to have her. She is a friend of Liz. So maybe, Jenny, tell us how you know Liz.
How long has it been, Liz? I met Liz, was it 6 or 7 years ago?
That sounds about right.
Maybe it was less than that. In a yoga teacher training that we were attending together. And that's how I met Liz. Yeah. Awesome. I love her.
That's how I feel about Jenny. I've been stalking her on Facebook for ages because even though you meet in a setting like that, so our kind of circles revolve around each other there, but she lives in a different city. You live in a different part of, the community, and it's like waving on Facebook in passing or whatever,
Right.
So,
Okay, awesome. We are excited to have you come on today. The specific thing that we brought you to talk about is grief. So I kind of want you to a little bit maybe introduce yourself and kind of give us a setup of what happened before the incident.
Okay, so introduce myself. Let's see. What am I? I'm amazing. Just kidding.
You are amazing. That's why we have you on the show,
all?
sister friend.
Oh, goodness gracious. I don't know. I'm a mom, 5 kids, been married 22 years.
Way to go.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's a big
deal.
It's
kind of amazing how fast that goes.
Mm-hmm.
It is a big deal. And I feel like those are like the typical things we introduce ourselves with, but they're a pretty important part of me. Anyway, I have another little tidbit about me is I do love yoga. I've been practicing that for a while. I love meditation, but I'll also kind of talk a little bit about that in regards to grief and how that's kind of more for me. So yeah, those are a few things about me. I work in a bookstore.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's
a really cake job.
Jenny's one of those cool yogis that can actually do some of the stuff that makes all of us other one. I know it's not a measure of skill. I'll talk to everybody all day long about how yoga is just breath and all the other stuff. But the first time I saw your skateboard hand press, I was like, that's it. I'm done. She is amazeballs. Wait, is it skateboard or longboard? Now I feel silly. Which one?
Well, both.
Oh,
it just depends on the board, Liz.
This girl's amazingly talented and just stinking fun. We had to group up in one of our activities, and I just loved immediately. She just shines this bright drive and zest for life, and that it was one of those things that you just want to be around her and hang around her. So that's why I've been stalking her all this time too, and kind of watch these things unfold for her. And we have to. My own experiences with grief, we have to have someone who's really experienced this side of it's just not all okay because from a religious perspective that, we love each other, we know we might see each other again, or whatever perspective we're taking, there's a lot of other things that come into play there. So
there are a ton. Yeah. So I'm grateful that you've asked me to chat about it. I was really nervous about it. But I also feel a great calmness because I feel like it's something that's messy and it's something that needs to be talked about. And yeah. I do. I talk to anyone who will listen and I ask a billion questions, and I feel like that's a great part in my own personal healing to be able to do that. So
oh yeah, that's
yeah.
Cool.
So basically, if just to fill you in on my story with kind of what's happened with that is I'm the oldest and the only girl in my family. I have 3 younger brothers. I have a brother who's a year younger than me, Matt, and then I have a brother who's 2 years younger than him. So we're all kind of close together.
Wow.
And then I have a younger brother who came 8 years later. So he's 11 years younger than me. So that's us.
Okay.
And I've been pretty close with my brothers, my family, my whole life. We all live close together. Yeah, we all live within a few miles of each other, really. And then at times, not the case. We've lived different places, but at the time of the accident, the last few years, we've all lived close by. And my parents live in a basement apartment with us, which is really nice. Has its challenges, but it's a greater blessing than not. So that's kind of just a little bit about my family, and I feel like that plays an important part in things. So
yeah, absolutely.
So Easter weekend last year, 2018.
Okay.
It was a Friday night, and I was just at home, just chilling, and my dad comes running upstairs, and he just says that my brother Matt, who is a year younger than me, the one that's a year younger than me, was in a dirt bike accident. So I immediately am like, oh my goodness, what do we do? And he just says, we're going to go see what's going on. And my brother Matt he's always been kind of this crazy thrill seeker. Anyway, so he loves all kinds of things he's a mechanic, and he just does everything with his hands. He's a lot of fun, a lot of energy, just so vivacious and fun, like just lived life. Yeah. And so my first reaction was, oh crap, what did he do? Like, seriously?
Oh yeah.
Because he's been in accidents before and things like that. And, this is kind of, these thoughts that I'm having kind of play a part, as we can go on, right? And the things that you reflect back on that you think about, they kind of come to plague you.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I was thinking. And then of course I get on Facebook, because that's what you do when something like that happens, to see what his wife has posted. And she of course is freaking out as well, and asking everyone to pray. And so anyway, so that weekend was a little bit nuts. Throughout the evening, we just come to find out that the accident was absolutely horrific. I honestly can't even, I'm thinking, should I gather all these details? And I'm like, I didn't gather details, and I still struggle talking about it, just because at least the details, right? So his accident was, he was out at 5 Mile on his dirt bike with a friend.
Okay.
And he was going up kind of a steeper hill. And with dirt bikes, the thing is when you're going up a hill, you have to have that momentum to get up the hill, or the bike can lay down, and it'll also pitch you off. Well, so not only he's going up this hill, and I don't think he had a ton of speed, but enough to get up, and then he hit a rock, and it pitched him off the edge of a cliff, basically.
Oh my God.
And he fell like 60 feet, 70 feet. Like, it was not a small little thing.
Oh my
And
God.
what was interesting about it was that it was the road was far enough away from the edge of the cliff that there wasn't any concern. However, what was interesting was that the cliff kind of went into this V, and it teed right at this place where he hit this rock, and it just threw him far enough that it just at this particular point he goes off. And the boulders below were as big as cars. They were just massive. And so he fell on that, and he was wearing all his protective gear and everything, but it was just an awful fall. And he lived. His friend had to hike down and up to him and propped him up, which kept him alive. And then they had no cell service, so he had to go out and find some help for him. So obviously that friend has some major trauma from that whole experience there. But anyway, they were able to get the help they needed. Long story short on that, and life flighted him to the where he was at a local hospital here.
Okay.
Anyway, and so he lived, and there was this moment. So Friday night this happened. My husband went to the hospital. The second I kind of found out how severe it was, I kind of shut down. I struggle with anxiety anyway, but there was just this part of me that didn't want to even believe that something, that he could not make it.
Yeah.
So I was just clinging to this, he's fine, I don't want to hear about it kind of thing.
Okay.
And I just couldn't even bring myself to get to the hospital. Like everybody went. My husband's like, I'm going to go up, and I'm like, I can't go. Like for some reason, I can't go. I'm going to stay here. Let me know what I can do. And so, it was probably like about 3 o'clock in the morning. And that whole time I proceeded to get more and more sick as I'm learning about how awful his injuries are.
Yeah.
He had massive internal bleeding and shattered basically the whole right side of his body. He didn't even have a shoulder.
Was he conscious at this point? Like talking to people?
No.
Oh, no. Okay.
He was conscious, obviously, before life lighted out, and then they put him in an induced coma.
Oh, okay.
And kept him that way because it was so severe. So there's just that part of me that's like, oh my gosh, I still think like, what was he was conscious, still in and out of consciousness when he was waiting for all of that, and alone because his friend had to go get that help. Like that, those are just some of the worst things that kind of go through your head.
Yeah.
You know, and he's a fighter. Like he is just a fighter on every level. So I can't even imagine what he's thinking and feeling. But so my husband comes home and proceeds to just go down the list of everything. I mean, he has no teeth. His face is completely,
oh my God,
gone. He's broken his back in several places and lots of internal damage, just lots of internal. He pretty much, his intestines were just blown to bits. And
oh my
gosh.
It was just like the more I'm listening to my husband tell me this, and I just had this. I'm like, I can't hear anymore. Like I was immediately sick and spent the whole rest. I had no sleep that night, and of course my family. This is just me, right? Like this is just what I'm feeling.
Right.
Can't even like. There's just the whole other side of my family that I could go on and on about, but my brother has wife and 6 kids, so it really had a massive impact on everyone. And the hard thing about a lot of it during this time was that the kid could see him. He was just, the second you saw him, it was not pretty, and he was completely swollen. So it wasn't until, this was Friday night, it wasn't until Saturday night that I could even muster up enough courage to go, which I just feel terribly guilty about. Like it just still plagues me a little bit, and not a little bit, a lot. But it was also very therapeutic to be able to finally go and see him and kind of talk to everybody. And then we all pretty much just stayed there as much as we possibly could. And so at that point in time, we were hopeful that he would live. But I think that we all kind of knew deep down that it would not be the quality of life that he would even come back from. So that he would even be able to endure anybody else, and the amount of care that he would need. And just as those things kind of started to settle upon all of us, we just knew that this wouldn't be the life that Matt would want. And the greatest threat was blood clots and the clotting that would happen. And so that was pretty imminent on Sunday. And in the meantime, you know, I'm very religious. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that weekend was kind of that conference is what they call it, where we hear from our church leaders. And so I was listening to that, where a lot of my family wasn't able to do that, but I did. And I wanted to feel comfort, but I didn't. And I prayed a lot, and I didn't feel that at all, really. In fact, it was kind of an interesting thing for me, and something that I've battled since then is just this anger that kind of creeps in, like, why is this happening kind of thing. But so that was kind of happening, and I was just kind of trying to process the significance of Easter, and the fact that this is happening at this time. And so it kind of really brought, me questioning a lot about my higher power and the kind of the purpose of why in the heck we're here and what is happening with this. And I think anytime you have a brush with death, these are the questions that we all ask.
Right.
I don't care who you are. We ask this: why are we here? And what is the purpose of it all? And so I really started to have a lot of those questions, and I feel a lot with people. So it was really difficult to kind of be around my family at this time and feel the effects of all of this, because some of my family is religious and some of them are not. My brother Matt was, not always though. And so that also was something that a lot of the family was kind of trying to digest, is where is he at spiritually in life, at the time, So those were there was just a lot of things happening in
Yeah.
that time. So anyway, Sunday was just kind of, Sunday night rolled around and it was just looking like the biggest threat was the blood clots. And Monday morning, I get a text from my mom. Like, I talked to her on the phone for a minute because my mom was there 24/7 with them all. And she basically just says, I don't think he's going to make it. There's blood clots from the brain and I don't think he's going to make it. And so I immediately, it's interesting when you find out that someone is going to die. You know what I mean? It's like right at that moment that she had texted me that, I lost it. In fact, it's interesting because I've talked to people since then who learn about losing someone that they love, and they say that there's this sort of guttural cry that comes out of you, this thing that just erupts from your body, and you don't even know where it's coming from, and you don't even recognize the sounds that are coming out of you. And that happened, and I felt terrible because my little 9-year-old daughter, 8 at the time, was just standing in the door, and she witnesses all of this. I didn't know Wendy, she was there, and I'm just gut wrenching, sobbing thing, and she just starts sobbing, Mom, and I grabbed her and I just hugged her and I just talked to her, and it was this weird thing. But I think back on it and I just think that it happened again. It happened again the second I showed up at the hospital. It was interesting. Each person that came off the elevator in the ICU, it was just this same sort of the gut wrenching crying that was happening. And it wasn't just me, it was just everyone. And it was just an interesting, I think back on those things and I think it's just the body's natural response to pouring out, right? Grief literally is that. It's just a thing. And it isn't just death. That's another thing I've learned, is that it just comes out of you. And if we suppress that, if we think that, you know what I mean? These sounds and these feelings and this gut wrenching thing that happens when we have any kind of loss, that's just a normal part of our body coping with that. And anyway, it was a really interesting experience to be there with my family and to be in the room when my brother passed away. It was just, it's interesting because in yoga teacher training, we talked a lot. I've never really had of someone passing away and being in the same room and having that experience. But in yoga teacher training, I don't know if you remember this, Liz, I was very fascinated with, our teacher explained a lot about, basically yoga, our practice is like practicing our life on our mat, right?
Yep.
And then when it's time to go, we as our final pose, and it's literally called corpse pose. And it's basically this letting go. Am I ready to go? And we fight that. We fight it on our mat. We resist letting go. There's fears and all kinds of things that come up, and it was interesting to kind of watch that with my brother. He was ready to go, and because we've often there's the normal kind of breathing that happens, and because they disconnected him, then he kind of had a hard time breathing, of course. But it was interesting in talking to other people as well about when they pass, and learning about, for instance, when my grandpa passed a few years ago, it was just, there's this resistance to them going. They hang on for a long time. It's almost like this battle that they choose to have happen, in a sense, right? But
some of it's our pull on them too, don't you think? I've wondered if it's us holding on to that space for them too, maybe.
Totally agree with you on that one as well. And I think it was interesting as we kind of disconnected Matt. There was a lot. He had a bunch of us in there, his closest friends and family, and we all gathered around him and we talked to him and we talked about him and we laughed about some of the funny memories with him, all part of our coping, right? But we all, towards the end, just said to him, Matt, it's time to go. We're going to take care of your family. We love you. And we just know that this is be here and to stay here and to keep hanging on is just not conducive, to the life that you would want to have, and we know that. And we just saw all of us just talked to him this way. And it was just, I don't know. It was just fascinating to me,
beautiful.
How much, I think when I pass, am I going to be ready to go? Are the people around me going to be agency thing, right? Choice. Can I let someone go? Can I let them choose for themselves and be okay with that? I don't know. It's just an interesting thing, and it's something I'm still digesting and learning a lot from still,
For sure.
So yeah, it wasn't long. He passed pretty quick, and it was a very interesting experience. Something that I felt, or my higher power, I felt God with me at that moment. And I felt an element of peace because I hadn't that whole time. I felt like this, my gut I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't stay out of the bathroom. And I just felt sick. And it's like when he was gone, I felt okay. And I thought for a while how weird that was, but I think it was part of that. I was feeling with him, and he was at peace. And so I felt like I could be at peace. So that was kind of a weird thing to have happen.
Yeah.
But I think the craziest thing for me was everything that happens after a trauma like that. You don't know that it's coming. It just hits out of the blue sometimes. My grandma passed a couple of years before Matt, and she had Alzheimer's, and I was very close with her. And it sounds terrible, but it was a slow death. So it's like we knew in time that she would go. I mean, over the course of 8 to 10 years, and then the last year started to get progressively worse. And so it's like a preparing of sorts, right?
Right.
It's never easy when someone passes, but she lived her life,
Yeah.
And this was something completely different. It was just out of nowhere. And I literally couldn't digest. What I thought was really interesting was because I couldn't emotionally digest it or spiritually digest it. For probably 6 months after he passed, I couldn't eat. I probably lost.
Oh my gosh.
Pounds. And my anxiety was terrible. There were times when I literally was down in bed for a week at a time.
Really?
It hit me very hard. And what was also interesting is that immediately after his passing, the family, we all rallied. We were all together, but my goodness, almost within a month after, everybody all the things started to come up. Like, for instance, my sister-in-law really struggled being around the family because we all had each other. We had our spouses. She didn't have hers. So she would come to things alone, and everybody had their spouse with them, and she didn't have Matt with her. So going to her family things, going to my family things, and she struggled immensely, and it was difficult because I like to make people feel comfortable, but you can't.
Yeah.
So there was a whole lot of, for a long time, like all of us trying to kind of fix each other, trying to like help each other, but we couldn't help each other because we couldn't really even help ourselves. Like we all were in a significant amount of pain, It was especially difficult because I was kind of one that kept my family together. We got together a lot, but my 2 other brothers weren't really communicating with me much. And so I remember kind of getting upset. So there was so much more like heightened emotion. I got mad easier. So I kind of like, why are you not texting me back? I lost one brother, and the second that came out of my mouth when I said that to my one brother, I could tell that was just too much. And since then is completely withdrawn. And so so there's all these things that you don't anticipate will happen when someone passes. It isn't just, and I went to a class recently about grief that kind of answered this for me. There isn't just the trauma of someone passing away, right? There isn't just that. There's the traumas that happen after. There's the ripple effect. Okay. And no one talks about that or prepares you for that.
Your friends probably didn't know that was happening, right? You were just dealing with all these waves, and they're thinking the initial thing where you're dealing with these layers.
Right. Tons of layers. And what's interesting to me about all of that too, it's something that I learned right after is that, and we often talk about this with grief and loss, is that we don't know what to say to each other. So either we say the wrong thing or we don't say anything at all.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, that's just something to think about. Like, so what do? Do you say something and risk offending someone, or say nothing at all? And I think it's a personal thing. Everybody's different, but from my end and from what I've gone through, I'd rather somebody say something. In fact, some of the greatest things are people who, and this is a big problem with grief, is that grief cannot be silent. It cannot be silent. One of the most healing things for people is to share their story and to share it repeatedly to anyone who will listen. And so to ask someone what happened, how are you doing? Is one of the greatest things that you can do, because you're giving them an opportunity. They can choose to say no, where it was hard, or make that answer as little or as long as they like, but you give them that opportunity. It's healing for them. It's another way for them to digest something by talking about it.
I really actually appreciate that you've said that, just because in my own experience with the few things that I've dealt with, I remember one of the hardest parts was when I was still dealing with my own traumas after, like you said, the ripple effect. I mean, everybody else has moved on, and I don't expect them to, I guess, to totally cater to every single one of my emotional needs at that point necessarily. And I could tell that they felt awkward around it too, but then it wasn't even talked about or addressed. And that I just felt so alone, because of that. It felt like the elephant in the room we still just weren't discussing. Yes, I'm still not getting out of bed. You're right. I am still in my pajamas. Like, how am I really doing? That's how I'm really doing. It's not going great. It's not.
Yeah, you learn almost right away who you can tell what you're really feeling versus, the fake. I'm fine. It's fine. But it isn't fine. And it isn't fine for a long time. I'm still not fine. You know what I mean? There's still these times that just completely overtake you. But yeah, it is not something that we do about anything. It's interesting. I just had a thought pop into my head. I remember when my little girl went to the park. She was probably 4, and she met a friend there who didn't have an arm. And the first thing that she said to her friend was, "What happened to your arm? Why don't you have an arm?" And her friend just said, "I was born without my arm." And she says, "Oh, is that hard to not have an arm?" And she started asking this girl all these questions. And I observed this going, wow, okay, we don't do that in our society. We don't address the things that we even see that seem abnormal versus the things that we know have happened to someone that are not, okay.
Right.
They're not okay. Something happened to someone and they're not okay. Do we have the courage to just be blunt enough to say, "How are you?" Like, does it have to be someone that we know well or not? Like, it's been an interesting lesson for me. One of the things that I've learned the most about. And in fact, it's interesting working in this bookstore. There are a lot of people who come in asking for grief. Where's the grief section? And I immediately am able to have had some of the most amazing conversations with people because I know what it feels like. And so I can ask them straight up, like, "How are you? What's going on? Have you lost somebody recently?" And help them through that. And they are able to share their story. And then I can share mine, and to cry with people and to listen to people and to sit with people is just, it's a gift that I didn't realize how great of a gift that was.
I find that so fascinating. So are you familiar with Harry Potter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So when Harry Potter and I think it was Luna and they go to Hogwarts and there's those horses and nobody else can see them but them. Do you remember that part?
Yes.
And it was because they had lost someone, right? Someone that they loved. And I've noticed that with the people that I know have experienced that loss and that grief, there is a connection there. And I've noticed it. I haven't personally had that experience. Like, I've had a grandparent die, but like you said, it's kind of like you are ready for that. You're kind of prepared for that experience.
Sure.
And so for me, sometimes I just really don't know how to handle it. Like, I want to help them, and yet I don't want to be opening up this box that they don't want to open yet. But with you having had it, I feel like you have this extra ability to be able to help someone and to ask the right questions and to stop when you feel like it's too much. So for someone like me who doesn't have experience, and maybe I'm sure I've said the wrong thing like 1,000 times to someone who's lost someone.
We all have.
Yeah. What is something like really, like, especially, you're 4 months after, you just barely remembered again that person lost their dad. What is something I could say to just let them know, "Hey, I'm thinking about you. And because sometimes you say, like, if you want to talk to me, call me." But I would never call that person if they said that to me, because I'm like, that's really awkward. So what is something that I could let them know specifically? I am here for you, no matter if it's a year later. But any ideas?
Yeah, for sure. Random things, like just a simple card. "I'm thinking of you."
Okay.
No joke. Some flowers, like cookies, especially if it's like somebody that you don't know well. right?
Yeah.
What's interesting to me is that our paths, like, let's say, for instance, you're around this person for an extended period of time. Maybe there's something, an event you go to and you happen to sit next to them, right?
Mhm.
That's a little bit different than just, I'm thinking of you and I want to drop something by.
Yeah.
So dropping something by is I'm thinking of you. That's it. That's all you have to say.
Okay.
To let them know that you're thinking of them. That's it, you know? But I think, and anything like that is very comforting at any time and can be done on a consistent basis, especially if you want to consistently support someone or you're constantly thinking of that person. You know, for a while, one of my favorite things to do was to just get flowers, and once a month I just give them to like someone, like whoever happened to be on my mind. That was like one of my favorite things to do.
Oh, I love that.
And
that
so
is
I
such
had
a beautiful thing.
It was fun, and I had some interesting experiences because obviously our energy speaks to each other, and so I just had some great experiences with that, and just how much that touched people. I didn't need to know why that person needed the flowers, but I had a couple of experiences where that really touched that person, and they were able to talk. It was just it's an invitation too. When you drop something off to someone, it's an invitation to talk. You know, I think I read a book right after Matt died that's called It's Okay That You're Not Okay. It's by Megan Devine. I think that's how you say her name. And in it, she talks about our society is a fix-it society. It's basically grief is a sickness, and we need to do anything that we can to help people get better. So what happens is we're afraid, we're afraid to ask someone how they're doing since the passing of their dad or their brother, or how are you doing since your divorce, or how are you doing since whatever. Grief is not just the trauma of death and that loss. That trauma hits us all in many different ways. Like it could be anything. And so she also talks about that in her book, which I also liked as well. And the fact that can we ask that question and be willing to feel with that person.
Right.
But what we do is we ask that question and we're uncomfortable. We want to just drop something off and move on because it's difficult to feel that with someone. It's difficult to sit with someone and let them tell their story and listen.
And at the same point, not be able to help them. Like really, you can't. And to me, that's really sad.
Take it away.
No,
you can't take it away.
Mm-mm.
But the thing is you don't want to either. One of the things that made me mad, and I loved it at the time in yoga teacher training, was, and I've heard it several times since then, right? Like that the journey is the destination, and that things that happen to us, our trials and things that happen in our life can be blessings, right? They can be, because we can learn from them and they teach us something. I really hated that for a very long time after Matt passed. I hated it. I thought there's nothing beautiful about this. What am I learning? Nothing. And that's what we do. We just kind of move immediately into that victim mode, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I think we just have to have an awareness of, that in time we do learn these things. And what do you learn? You learn how to see, right? You learn how to see that in others, and you learn how to feel with them, and how you're not taking it away by listening, but you are actually doing a great deal more for them than you ever could do, right? What you think you can do by taking it away, you're just allowing them an opportunity to process something that you care and that you're willing to feel with them. I mean, how often have we talked to someone and we're sharing with them a story that's upsetting, and we start to cry and they start to cry with us? Have you ever had that happen and you're just kind of taken back by that person's ability to feel with you?
Yeah.
I've had that happen a few times, and I'm like, wow, there's something about that connection that feels so good. And I've been able to experience that and been able to see that. And not just with people who've had loss with death, like other interesting experiences as well. It's just this thing that I've been able to see and feel, and I'm grateful for that. I wouldn't have had that any other way.
That concludes our first half of the interview with Jenny about grief. And I'm just so impressed with her and the knowledge and experience that she has dealing with grief. It really helps. I've had friends lately that have gone through grief, and I haven't really understood or known the best way to deal with it. And I feel like she's given me some good ideas on how to help people that I know that are going through grief, and also to prepare myself for the day that I will go through grief. I really believe that at some point everyone is going to deal with grief multiple times, probably. And I can refer back to this podcast. If you know someone that is dealing with grief currently or dealing with someone who is dealing with grief, please pass this podcast on to them. I'm hoping that her words will reach people who need to hear this and to know that there is a light at the end of the grief, but it's okay to go through it. And I think that's what Jenny kind of was saying. Tune in next week for the second half. And we're excited to hear and complete that interview. And remember to keep learning because it does matter. And so do you.